Hi folks. Well, as typically happens, you get flat tires with equipment. You can see this front tire on the Allis-Chalmers D14 is flat. I ran over a stick a couple days ago when I was mowing with the brush hog, and it just caught the sharp edge of the stick such that it punctured right into the tire. And of course then that went through the inner tube on the inside, and so the tire is now flat. Not a huge surprise considering these tires are just about bald. There isn't a whole lot of thickness on the tread there to protect that, but until I can afford to get some new tires for the front of this is what I'm going to have to deal with. So I'll walk you through the process of fixing a flat tire, changing it out. Now, some people might simply say, well, why don't you just throw the inner tube away and get a new one? But this actually is a new inner tube. I had flats with these two front tires shortly after I got the tractor. Similar kind of thing. I actually put different old tires on thinking these were better. But so I did replace the tubes. The tubes that were in were kind of old. And so this is a brand new tube, and it'll only have one small hole in it, so it is fixable. We'll just have to patch it, but we'll walk you through that. The first thing I've got to do, of course, is jack this up and take the lug nuts off of the front wheel here so I can get the wheel off, and then we'll go from there. But I'll come back to you with the next phase of this tire change. This process of repairing flat tires is pretty similar for many different vehicles and things, and you're going to run into that in the country. You're going to run into flat tires. Most of your equipment has inner tubes in it. If it doesn't, you typically want to put them in because it gives you an extra layer of protection, and also sometimes the rims on tractors or lawn tractors or other implements, dump carts, or any number of pieces of equipment, the rims aren't perfectly round, so a tubeless tire eventually will lose some air, and you don't want that. But if you put a tube in, even if it doesn't require one, you've got that extra layer of protection. So that's what we're going to work on here, and we'll let you know how it goes. Okay folks, as you can see, the tire came off relatively easily. I have a 2-foot breaker bar that works really well to loosen lug nuts. It's a 1/2-inch head on it for a 1/2-inch socket, or an impact socket, whatever you're going to use. These particular lug nuts were 3/4 inch, so then I just used my 1/2-inch ratchet and a regular socket to take them out. No big deal. Now, the first thing I've got to do is I've got to remove any remaining air in the tire. And to do that, I'm going to take certainly the cap off the valve stem, and then I have this little tool right here. This is a valve stem valve remover. There's a little central piece in the valve stem that controls the air pressure going in when you put air in, and also to hold the air in. This will pull those guts out of there so that all the air can come out of the tube. Also, when I put pressure on the tire pushing down on it, it'll help more air to come out. I want the inner tube to be as empty as possible to make it easier to get out, because I do have to remove it from the rim. The next step after that's done, of course, is to break this top bead here. You can see how the tire is tight on the bead, and I need to break that down, pull that bead over top of this side of the rim, and then I can remove the inner tube. To do that, I've got 2 tire spoons here. They're spoon bars, basically. They're good for hand work when you're putting tires on or taking them off. I don't have a tire changing machine here, so obviously I have to do it all by hand. But I'll be using those. It's also a good idea to have some kind of soap and water mixture for lubricant to work the bead off of the rim and then to put it back on. When I get to that stage, I'll get something like that. And once the inner tube is pulled out, I can reinflate it, find where the hole is, mark it, and then begin the patching process. So that's where I am right now. It's the question of getting the tube out of the tire and the rim assembly and repairing it at that point. The stick that went in was relatively small, so I don't think I need to patch the inside of the tire. If this were a bigger hole, what I would actually have to do is I'd have to spread the bead in the tire. I'd have to take it off the rim completely. I'd have to spread the beads out in the tire, find the inside hole, prepare and place a patch on the inside of the tire so that you know, that there's no pressure pushing the tube out through the hole. With a tubeless tire, of course, we don't do much patching anymore. We plug them, and that basically, there's a rubber plug that you insert from the outside. You don't even need to take the tire off the rim to do it. But obviously with a tube tire you can't do that, so that's not an option for me. But like I said, the stick I think was small enough, the hole that went in, at least what I could see on the tire, was small enough that I don't need to worry about patching the tire. I think patching the tube will be sufficient. So we'll see when we get to it, but that's the plan at this point. Well, we got the tire off the rim, or at least the top one. I had to break the back bead too because I couldn't get the tube out, so I had to use a little more persuasion with my sledgehammer there to get that. I didn't have to pull the tire off completely, but I may still have to do that. I did get the tube out. I'm ready to put the stem back in and blow it up and see where the hole is. The problem that I ran into that may require me to actually have to patch the tire too is the fact that what was in here was a piece of wood, not a piece of metal. So when I pulled the inner tube out, I could reach up in and I could feel a piece of wood sticking in through the top of the tire. But the problem was getting it out. I didn't want to just grind it down for fear that if there was some still embedded in between the rubber of the top of the tire there, that it could still puncture the tube again. So what I ended up having to do, because I couldn't get a good enough grip onto the piece of wood with, say, a lineman's pliers or another kind of pliers to pull it out like I could. If this had been, say, a piece of nail, I could have probably pulled it out from the top and pulled it straight up. But anytime I would squeeze real hard on the piece of wood, all I would do is shred it. So what I ended up having to do to get it out is I actually had to get my drill out, drill down through the top of the tire and kind of drill the wood right out of the opening. In fact, this is the only thing that's left of it, this tiny little piece. That's what finally fell out. It was probably a little thicker than that, but here, let me pull it down here, maybe you can see that a little better. It was probably a little thicker than that originally, but that's what was left of it. So that's all it took to puncture this tire, something a little bit bigger than that. Now, what I'm probably going to have to do, first of all, I'm going to fix the tube. But because I now have an 1/8 inch hole drilled all the way down through the tire, I'm fairly certain that I got all the wood out of it, but I still don't want that being a friction point where the tube would rub against the inside of the tire. It should be relatively smooth. So I may have to put a small patch on there, which means I've got to take the rest of the tire the rest of the way off the rim, spread the bead, and patch it just like I would patch, say, a tubeless tire, or a tire where I was replacing the tube, but I just fixed the tire and not the tube. So I'm going to probably have to do that just for the sake of not ruining this inner tube and having more flats unnecessarily. The ironic thing about this is where that piece of stick went through the bead, or the top of the tire, was approximately 1 inch from where there was another patch in this old tire. If the stick had hit where the patch was, it probably wouldn't have gone through both the rubber and the patch, and I never would have had a problem. But it just missed the patch, so it didn't have that extra thickness of rubber to absorb it, and it went all the way through into the tube. So that's the way it goes. Next move is going to be blowing up the inner tube, finding where the hole is, and then cleaning it up to patch it. Okay folks, I have blown up the inner tube, put a fair amount of air in it, and right where I have my thumb is where the hole is. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it once I pull my thumb away, or maybe you'll be able to see it. It's not very big, but it's right there. So that's what I need to deal with. Take all the air back out of the tube. I'll mark this before it goes down just so I don't lose it by chance. Take all the air out, then it's a few step process. First thing is to rub the rubber as clean as I can get it, and then there's a little bit of a scraper pad you use to just rough up the rubber around the hole. And then you'll put the glue in, let it dry, just about put your patch on, adhere it good and tight, and then it should be completely sealed off. And yes, I think I am going to have to patch the tire too, because that hole's going to be too big. So that's what's okay. Our tire repair is progressing. If you look here, you can see the new patch is in place on the inner tube. I have it blown up just to make sure it's not going to leak while I'm working on the tire itself. It seems to be holding fine. And as you can see, I did get the tire off the rest of the rim. That is sitting over here on the workbench, and I already have the glue in it. Let's see if you can see it there. There you can see maybe a bit. I just have to wait for that glue to dry, and then I'll be putting this patch on. And just peel the white off the back. That's adhesive. Stick it over the glue. Then I like to use a tool sort of like this to rub it in place to make sure that there are no air bubbles. They do make a regular roller like this. It's more heavy duty than this one. I don't have one of those. This is a roller to put the rubber beading in a screen when you're replacing a screen, but it's the same principle. You just basically rub it over the top of your be this way, over the top of it, so that it adheres very well and there are no air bubbles and there are no places on the patch where it isn't adhesing well. So that's going to be the second part of the repair once this dries down in here. And when that's the case, then I can start putting everything back together. The holes will be patched, and it should hold air without leaking again, or without any problems with you know, that hole from the stick sticking through rubbing against the tube. So that's where we are. We'll get back to you with the next step. Alright, we are in the process of putting everything back together now. So what I've done, definitely the patch held in the inner tube. I checked that. It did hold air for over a day, so no problem there. So what I did was I put the tire, the back bead over the top of the rim. So the back bead's back on. The top bead, of course, isn't yet. And then I first I emptied or released all the air out of the tube, took the stem out with the little tool, and squeezed as much air out of the tube as I could. You don't want any air in if you can help it, to try to tuck it back in. It fits a little snug, but basically you can see it's just underneath the, you know, it's underneath the rim there. You tuck it in by hand. Now the other thing that I have this little tool that's very helpful. It just attaches to the valve stem here, and then you can pull that through the hole, and you can hold the stem right in the center of the hole where you want it to be. When you're putting the other bead on, it would tend to maybe want to slide around a little bit, and you don't want your stem sticking out on an angle. You want it to come straight out so there's no extra pressure on the inner tube. It wants to come straight through there. So this little gadget here allows you to pull it through. This can also be used to put in a new valve stem on a tubeless tire on a rim. You basically just insert it through the hole, screw it onto the tip of the valve stem, and then just pull it through the hole till it seats itself. So it's a very valuable tool to have anytime you're doing tire work. So, and there are different versions of this. This one is just flexible wire. I've seen them where they're a solid piece of metal on a hinge, but either handle. But either way, as long as you can pull that valve stem through your rim, and hold it in place. That's what you want to do. Now my next move here, of course, is to put the top bead here on the rim, seated on the rim. This I have to be a little careful of, because as I'm prying this over the edge of the rim, I need to be careful with my spoons that I don't gouge the inner tube and put a puncture in that way. So you have to take it a little bit easy. But once that's over, then I can put my stem guts back into the valve and then reinflate the tire and put it back on the tractor. So hopefully the next video you see will be the tire back on the tractor and the job being finished. Thanks for watching. Well, here we are, final segment. Everything's back on. Pumped up to 25 pounds of pressure, which is good for this tire. Lugs are tight, everything's fine, and hopefully no more leaks. So we'll see what happens. I'll keep an eye on it just to be sure, but I believe this repair is now complete. So that's how you change and fix and repair a flat tire on a tractor or on basically any piece of equipment that's got a tube in it. You just got to get it off the wheel, get the tube out, get it patched, put it back together. Not difficult. Involves some manual work, of course, and if I had a tire changing machine like they have in the tire shops, it would have gone a whole lot quicker, but don't have the money for that, so we do it by hand. And anybody can do it by hand. You just have to take your time with it. And it's not difficult, because you are going to get flat tires if you have equipment. Mowers, tractors, dump carts, you name it. Anything that's got wheels on and air in the tires, eventually you're going to have a problem. So might as well learn how to do it so it's efficient and you can fix it yourself instead of having to pay somebody else to do it. So thank you for watching this series on the tire repair, and please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks again.